Conduct. Dr. Barrow, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Cahoon, board members, Dr. Chanoff. We wanted to present the red line and the PowerPoint. Because the red line is over 80 pages, we're going to focus on the PowerPoint, which has the major changes. Please note that not all of the changes in the Code of Conduct are reflected on the red line. on the PowerPoint, but the red line does have all the detailed information and the tracks the changes that we made. The first change is, the next slide is the overview, where we have the overview, the timeline of how we went through the changes, the summary of actions taken, the proposed revisions, next steps, questions, and discussions that we've had. In the overview, you can see that we revised the Code of Conduct based on statute and school board policies, administrative rules to make sure everything was reflected. We also want you to note that we have a clause in the Code of Conduct that if there are any changes in the statute or in any board policy after it's presented and approved, we would automatically make those changes on there. The next slide shows you the Code of Student Conduct timeline. In this timeline, we show how we get input from the faculty and staff, from community meetings, from parents using the Thought Exchange app, which I'll let Dr. Rhonda McMahon talk about how much input we received in that Thought Exchange.
So our Thought Exchange had, it was put up on all of our social media sites. So we had it on our webpage, all the school web pages. It went out through Remind app. We had 565 participants. They entered 184 thoughts about the Code of Conduct. We had, of those 184 thoughts, we had ratings, 6,930 ratings. So once you put a thought in, you can go through and you can rate whether you agree with it or disagree with it. And so the majority of the question was, as a parent, what do you feel should be added or changed to our Code of Conduct that would improve the learning environment for students? And the majority of the comments were Code of Conduct needs to be enforced. They wanted stricter consequences, and they also wanted more uniformity across schools. So if it was happening in one school, it happened in the other. You got the same consequences if you were an athlete or if you were just a regular kid in the school. So that was almost all of the comments. The only other one that came close was dress code. There were parents for and against it, but the consensus was consistency. If you're going to have one, be consistent with it and enforce it across all schools, because some schools enforce more than others.
And the beautiful thing about Thought Exchange is we really were able to get a lot of input from across the district, and it worked extremely well for either parents or staff or students who could not make it to the community meetings. They still felt like they got input for the Code of Conduct. The next slide shows the tentative schedule. We presented the changes to the Code of Conduct to Cabinet and received additional feedback that we added or are in the process of adding to the red line before the next board meeting. This is a workshop today. We're going to submit it for approval at the July 15th board meeting, and if approved, it will go into effect the following day, July 16th. The purpose of the Code of Conduct is to set expectations for student behavior and procedures, also to make them successful at the school, which is the ultimate purpose. Action summary revisions have been made to the existing policy changes, including content, formatting, and terminology. Obviously, we didn't include any formatting changes in the PowerPoint, but it is in the red line. The next steps is, once approved, we will make revisions to the internal process if needed, which includes the discipline manual that administrators use, and then we will provide training for school employees regarding revisions. So that training will be done during the summer at the Admin Institute and also throughout the year as needed. These are the changes, and obviously I'm not going to read it word for word, because it's available there, but I am gonna highlight some of the main changes. So if you look at the first one, which talks about statute language, the statute talks about that it grants school personnel the power to use reasonable force. The way that it was written in our code of conduct last year was to protect himself or herself. And just to make sure that it was clear, we wanted to use the exact language on the statute. The exact statute on the exact language on the statute said it was to maintain a safe and orderly learning environment. We didn't want to deviate from that because we didn't want to change the meaning for anybody.
We do, however, have to add the words reasonable force back in 1003.32, which is a change that is not reflected here but will be in the red line, does discuss reasonable force. So it is not just to maintain a safe and orderly learning environment, but you can use that reasonable force. So that will be added back in.
The next one talks about FHSAA rules. The main change on this rule is adding what the exceptions are for a student who maybe played at a sport after the season started at one school when they transfer over to another. This came up a couple of, I believe twice at two different board meetings last year. So we wanted to make sure that it was also clear on the code of conduct. So the exceptions are on the bottom right for a student that is allowed to play sports even if after the season started they transferred. The exceptions are children of active duty military, children relocated due to foster care, children who moved due to a court order change, and then we also have the good cause in district and reassignment by district school board.
What does that mean in practice?
So in other words, if a student does not meet the first three bullets, but they transfer from one school to another, we actually get input from principals of both the school that the student is leaving from and also the receiving school if there's an extenuating circumstance other than the three that I mentioned. So when we receive the request for a student to play a sport at the new school, that information is sent to myself, to the district athletic director, Ryan Adams, and to to Dr. Allen. We review it. We say, okay, is this is there a good cause for the student to be able to play at the following school? And then if all the votes come in and the majority says yes, then we allow the student to play that sport.
So this could be subjective.
So there are guidelines that Ryan Adams sends us in. So he sends us an email with the request. He sends us what the guidelines are, and then we use those guidelines to determine that, whether it meets the criteria of the good cause. So that the good cause guidelines are actually included in the email that he sends us. And I'm happy to share that email that he sends us when we get that request.
Where do the guidelines exist besides Ryan Adams sending it to you? Are they part of statute, or where would a parent, for example, learn about these?
So they currently reside in the athletic handbook that athletic directors receive.
Mm-hmm.
So it's already in our manual for the athletic directors. It's not something per se that is different every time, and Ryan sends us those updates. It's already included in the manual.
Okay, but where did those guidelines come from? Where are we getting the guidelines for what would be an exception aside from the ones that are listed in the code of conduct?
So my understanding is that they come from the input the athletic directors give when they have that at the athletic directors meetings on what would be allowable. And I can research it more.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out if this is something that's coming from common practice, if it's like who governs that, because those issues come up pretty frequently. So I want to make sure that when we're engaging with the public, we understand like where all these are coming from.
And do parents get notified of these?
Yeah.
Like when their child starts a sports program or something, are they notified of like this is a rule that we have through FHSAA and are aware of it? You know, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm going to send you that information because there is another clause in there, but I don't have it in the PowerPoint,
Sure.
but I can get that to you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, the next slide talks about electronic device language. So in levels 1, 2, and 3, and 4, electronic device language is included in terms of violation. The first one, the level 1 electronic device language talks about an example of a violation would be if a student takes out their phone to text or just to make a phone call during the school day. Previously, we had for a level 2, if they committed a level 2, it would be an example of misuse. We took out the word or repeated misuse because there's other criteria in the electronic device language that would change that for the level 2. But before that, there was language that seemed a little contradictory because we said from the first morning bell to dismissal, and then there was another section that said that anytime the student's on campus. So to reflect the change, we put the use of wireless communication is prohibited upon entry to school campus. There is an expectation with the bill that's out there, and I'll let Ms. Korn speak to that there's a bill that's going to make it even tougher than it was this current year.
There's a possibility of a bill being signed that would, right now the statute states that students cannot use their electronic devices during the school day unless a teacher allows it for instructional purposes. That caveat of allowing it for instructional purposes may be taken away. So if it is, that would mean that they cannot use it at any time during the school day for any reason. If that change is made statutorily, then the district could go back based on the language we've now added in the code stating that we can update the code based on statute to just change that, and it would just require sending out a notice to families.
So that bill passed, it just hasn't been signed yet, or is that one that's still moving because they're not finished?
I believe it's still moving, but I am not sure. So I have not looked at that today, so I don't know. I will let you know.
Okay, before we show you the electronic device languages from the level 2, 3, and 4s, we on page 29 of the Code of Conduct, it talks about the felony, off-campus felonies. We're changing our current language to be exactly like the statute language. So the main difference is if you look on the right column, is the last sentence where it says that in order to have a student meet the criteria of an off-campus felony charge in terms of code of conduct, it has to have an adverse impact on the educational program, discipline, or welfare in school in which the student is enrolled.
And the reason for that is simply to make sure that all of our principles are equitable in how that is implemented. So they will need to detail how there is a substantial impact, and that is a direct substantial impact. So it would be, for instance, if a student commits a felony and is arrested for that, and the felony is committed on a student or a family member of a student, it can't just be something that is tangentially related. Now, that is different if a student pleads guilty or nolo contendere, then at that point, that felony would require them to be moved to New Beginnings regardless of if there's a substantial impact or not.
Okay, so in general, we try, with this language change, we're looking to make it easier to understand for students and school staff. Basically, if a student does commit a felony, off-campus felony that adversely impacts the campus, the student can be suspended for 10 days. If after the 10 days we still don't have a court decision, then we can place the student in New Beginnings until that court decision is made. If the court decision that's made is that the student is found not guilty, or I don't know the other terminology, but basically not found guilty, they can return at that moment to their home school. If they're found guilty or nolo contendere?
No, nolo contendere is actually, would be considered an admission of guilt for a felony suspension. It's no contest, so you're not saying they're not guilty, you're just saying that you're not saying you are.
So in the case that they're found guilty, they would remain at New Beginnings, and we would do an expulsion hearing if needed. Okay, electronic device, okay, level 2, the change is that we took out the word misuse because the main part of the level 2 is the type of violation that they commit. It's beyond just texting or looking at their phone. It's gaming, video, audio, or recording something that they shouldn't be recording. The level 3 violation, the same thing. We took out the word misuse because it's more about what they do. Like, for example, if they're using their phone to record fights, videoing of other students, and factory reset of district devices, which is frowned upon. It becomes a level 3. There was a code that was called violation of early reentry plan, and when we looked at the consequences for the year, we did not see any time that it was ever used. And it really didn't seem to make sense because we have other areas that this would fit into, whether it's repeated misconduct or other serious misconduct or something of that nature. Or trespassing, like if they try to come to their school before they're supposed to, and it would make the criteria of a level 4. The next one is from page 59, alcohol offenses. Okay, so this would be the first alcohol offense. The language is the same except that we added very specific information about the consequence for the first time, which would be aware for a student going to aware, and it would limit the out-of-school suspension to 3 days. If they don't complete aware after they were scheduled, then they would be recommended for expulsion. We just wanted to make it very clear for students that there is an intervention, because if they are drinking alcohol at the age of 14 or 16 or 11, we want them to get help. Same thing for the first time drug use offense, use or possession. Same language everywhere else, but if in lieu of the expulsion, they have an opportunity to do aware for first time offenders, and it's limited to a 3-day suspension. The next one is revision to IDEA language. Basically, if you see, the difference is left side has a lot more words, right side has a lot less, but the content matters because what the content is saying, there's a lot of room for misinterpretation on the left side about whether you could suspend a student that has an IEP for more than 10 days or not. We took out all that questionable language and just made it clear that a student with an IEP is maximum 10 cumulative days for the year, and there's no exception for that, except in some very extreme cases.
So there are some very extreme circumstances, obviously, where a student may already be at their 10 days, but because if they've made a threat or they've committed a very, very serious act, we may need to remove them for more than 10 days anyway. That would be something where the district would be responsible at a later date to provide compensatory education for those days missed. But in certain circumstances, it's necessary for the district to make up those days later and keep those students out in the immediate.
The next slide speaks to limited suspension days, but for students with 504. So when you look at suspensions for students that may have a 504, they're also limited to 10 days. The difference between this and IDEA is that if you have a manifestation determination meeting, potentially based on that determination, a student can receive more than 10 days.
So section 504 is clear that if the manifestation determination says that it is part of their disability, then they cannot be suspended or expelled for those 10 days, for more than 10 days. However, if what the student does is not a manifestation of their disability, they can be disciplined in the same manner as their non-disabled peers up and through a full exclusion.
And the next slide is the same context for 504, except that this is for recommendation for expulsion. So the same rules apply about the 10 days, but if you have the manifestation meeting and it's not a manifestation, you can add additional days. The next slide talks about we actually added an appendix by request to make sure that everybody is clear on, for example, what the AWARE program is and what the expectation is when you serve AWARE. The Osceola County Sheriff's Office JUMP program, which Dr. McMahon and I just visited last week, and it is a phenomenal program. It's great mentoring, and grade consequences and a grade intervention to suspension. We also added the pre-expulsion conference notes to make it clear not only to school staff and students, but also to parents, is that in the unfortunate event that a kid commits an expellable offense, what the process is. That way they know ahead of time, and they're not surprised by what the process is for that. And then we also added a health room report. The health room report is the report that nurses fill out for any students that visit their school for any reason. The reason we wanted to add that is that because that can also include if a student is suspected of being under the influence. We're also adding another one after we did the PowerPoint that is a more specific form that is used to determine whether a student or anybody on campus could be under the influence. So it's a form that's already approved by the health services and by HR. The next slide talks about the expulsion process.
Like a matrix of reasons why students are visiting the nurse?
Yes, there is. So what we observed is that, and we received input from our supervisor of nurses, is that it's a very general form. That when you look at the form, it doesn't really have a space that specifically talks about whether the child is under the influence. When we look at the under the influence checklist, which is a already approved document, it has that. So that's something that we're looking to add not only in the appendix for the code of conduct, but also in the nurse's manual, so that they understand what the process would be for that. And to give you an example of the health form, like it'll say like the student is it doesn't talk about some of those identifiers like dilated eyes, vomiting, etc. And so the other form has all of those specifics.
And our nursing supervisor said it's a very fine line between them saying that somebody is on drugs and just documenting symptoms. So that's why the nurse's form is separate, because they're documenting symptoms, but this guideline will help them in case they may need some assistance identifying specific identifiers of drugs.
But yeah, both forms are very specific identifiable factors for students. So for example, bloodshot eyes. Student claims that he is not feeling well. It's a list of about 10 things, which is why we want to put it in the appendix so everybody's aware of the things that we look for. And it could potentially also help parents at home if they see that their child has some of those indicators. The next slide talks about the expulsion process. So based on information and input we received, we wanted to make sure we were differentiating from the most serious level 4 offenses to the less serious offenses. Not that any of them are not serious, but there's definitely a difference between some of them. So the offenses that are used as examples on the serious are homicide, weapons possession, sexual battery, arson, aggravated battery, drug distribution. Offenses such as those will result in expulsion or alternate placement for the maximum extent allowed pursuant to governing law. So how do we determine which ones are considered the most serious and the least serious? When we look at our current matrix, there are certain offenses that the expulsion, if the student is found to have violated the code of conduct, are mandatory expulsion, mandatory, alternate placement. The ones that are less serious in the matrix, you'll see that it says optional placement to alternative placement, optional to expulsion depending on the level of the offense. So those lesser offenses, if committed before the second semester begins, the student will receive the expulsion or the alternate placement for the remainder of the year. If it conducted after the second semester, the expulsion or alternate placement will be the remainder of the year plus 1.
Plus 1 was 1 year.
Plus 1 year, yes. Okay, so the expulsion recommendation process for students with IEPs. This one is the same as expulsion for any student until you get to the sixth bullet. In the sixth bullet, you'll see specifically that the student services will set up a meeting in collaboration with ESE at the school site for students with an IEP. And then we will have the meeting all at the same time. So it'll be, the first part will be to determine whether it is a level 4 or not. And that part will be done by student services. That's also the portion where the parent can present their case and present any new evidence or anything of that nature. If the next part is if we verify the level 4, the second portion will be the manifestation determination, which will be led by the school and the ESE department. If the If the behavior is determined to be a manifestation, the student's placement would not change, and the IEP team should review the need of any change to the IEP or evaluations. If the behavior falls under one of the special circumstances, according to the procedural safeguards, the IEP team can proceed with the administrator's request for a change of placement to an alternate setting in lieu of expulsion. If it's to be determined, if there is a manifestation, the IEP can proceed with the administrator's request for a change of placement to an alternate setting in lieu of expulsion.
So basically what this is doing is it's combining the ESE process and the discipline process together, but keeping them separate. So the discipline process verifies the level 4 and provides the discipline. The manifestation team determines if it's a manifestation or not. If the behavior is a manifestation, unless it's for basically drugs, guns, and serious bodily harm, the student cannot be removed for more than 45 days. So instead of having first a discipline meeting and then having them come back to do the manifestation, we're combining it all at once for efficiency at the schools and efficiency with the families.
Any additional questions? Comments? All right, with that,
I think Paul
had a question. Oh, yeah, just a
Oh,
quick
sorry. Thank you.
For the changes of the code of conduct, how are parents notified? It's just gonna be on the website?
So
They're
once
signing a copy?
So what we're gonna do is we're going to present the final red line and draft at the July 15th board meeting. So before that board meeting, the red line and the code of conduct is posted publicly, so that it can be viewed by anybody and they can provide input. And then at that board meeting, there's also opportunity for public comment before it's approved.
Also
But once it's
publicly where?
approved, I think, are you wanting it?
That
once it's
is-
approved, how they know?
Oh, I was just wanting to know how parents
Parents
can
will
see that
So
they
it's gonna
have
be
been
posted
notified.
publicly.
Yep.
Where is it posted? Let's be very clear. Where publicly is it posted?
So once it has been posted through the agenda and it's been approved, then it is posted on the student services website, it's posted on the main district website. When the student goes in the class link, there is an icon there that says Code of Student Conduct, so it's posted there, and that's something we added last year that was never there before. In addition to that, at the beginning of the year packet, all the parents get a letter that says, I understand that my student received the Code of Conduct, was reviewed with them, they went over the rules, and then the parent signs it and returns it to school.
And it'll be watermarked draft, so that until, if approved at the July 15th meeting.
And then we also have paper copies available for parents who request it. And it's on the district website in Spanish, Haitian Creole, and Portuguese.
So can we, once it's posted up there, can we send a notification out to all parents of where it's located?
Absolutely.
So then we can be sure that everybody is
And they're
noticed.
notified.
And there is the link to it that's on that paper parent sign, but we'll send out a reminder, something as well.
Yeah, I want to be able to make sure that they get the chance to review it while
Yeah.
it's still in draft form. I certainly don't want to get to a point where they're looking at it and saying, when was this finalized?
And we're gonna be making minor changes as the time goes, but we'll update the board with any changes that occur.
Okay, with that, this workshop is adjourned.
Yeah. Hey, Gabe, can you